Day two of the NFL Combine's wrapping up, and we just witnessed South Carolina safety Nick Emmanwori have the greatest safety performance here in Indianapolis that we have ever seen. Insane testing numbers, Ryan. He ended up having a 4.3840 at a listed 6'3" and 220 pounds, a 43-inch vert, and 11.6 broad. These are unheard of testing measurables for a guy of his size. He's built like a linebacker and he's moving like he's 5'9" and 180. Ryan, the question we now have to ask ourselves, should Emmanwori be safety one in this class? And has he solidified himself as a first rounder?
I think he solidified himself as a first rounder because I think he was a first rounder before he tested the way that he tested. Joe, ultimately, this is about verification. You saw in film that Emmanwori is incredibly huge, can play all over the place on the second and third level, is explosive, and he's a tremendous athlete. What we saw in Indianapolis is verification points of the kid's a great athlete. The kid's a huge athlete. The kid's a versatile piece for a defense. So I still believe, and I have believed all along, this is a first round prospect. He's been in the first round of my mock drafts, the last like 10 mock drafts I've written, right? So this is a first round player, in my opinion. Do I think he's safety one? I still think that's Malachi Starks because I do think that the testing number is going to make us kind of have a little bit of recency bias here. But he solidified himself as a round one prospect without question that is still on the rise. But I still do prefer Malachi Starks.
Yeah, I agree with you here that we already knew coming into this that Emmanwori was at least safety two. His athleticism was enough to put him in the conversation of being a late first round pick. Maybe positional value bumps him out of the first round. But I think there's going to be a lot of teams that see the ability to use him as a Kyle Hamilton type prospect because he's in that same threshold of gifted, just physical athlete that can do insane things. But I still stand in the camp that Malachi Starks, for me, of Georgia, is my top safety prospect because as much as we can do and I over the athleticism, the fluidity that Stark showed in the drills showed up. I don't care that he ran a 4.540. It does not mean anything to me. Anyone who's overreacting to that doesn't know what they're talking about personally. And I'm going with the on the field impact. I'm going with the decision making, the consistent, impactful reactiveness, and the fluidity in coverage. Emmanwori can go on to be a great player. I would just go with the player that is the most natural at playing the position.
It's really easy to get carried away with the testing stuff, right? But I do think that we need to remember, Joe, before Nick Emmanwori had the outing that he had, the best safety performance of all time was probably Obi Melifonwu, who was not a good NFL player. Now, in this situation, Emmanwori is a much better player and
Way
much
better.
better prospect than Melifonwu ever was. So I'm not comparing those two in that vein. I'm just saying the grain of salt comes with what the testing numbers are. It's a verification. He showed us everything that we need to see to be very comfortable with him in the first round, maybe potentially in the middle section of round one. But I also prefer Starks, and this is a flavor thing. If you want a guy that's going to play on the second level a ton, do some stuff in dime, be versatile, and be a really huge box presence, maybe you prefer Emmanwori. But for me personally, I prefer a safety that can make plays from range, from depth, that can play man-to-man coverage at times, that can move around and be a versatile coverage chess piece. That's what I think that Malachi Starks brings to the table.
Now we just have to quickly talk about two of the corner prospects who did a great job with their testing numbers that stood out. Maxwell Hairston of Kentucky runs a 4.28. He has a 39.5-inch vertical, a 10-foot 9-inch broad. He measured in at 5'11", 183 pounds. He looked amazing. And then a guy who has some crazy measurables, Darien Porter of Iowa State, who wasn't contributing a ton until towards the end of the season for Iowa State. His role is a little bit to be determined, I think, but we knew that this guy was crazy athletic for what he could be at 6'3" at 195. He runs a 4.340. He has a 36.5-inch vertical and a 10-foot 11-inch broad. Both those guys are easy to say were the clear cut winners of the corner group.
Yeah, I think Porter is going to end up being kind of that day two dart throw for a team because I don't think he's a guy that's going to come in the 2025 season for an NFL team and be like an instant starter. I don't see that because he's a little bit tight. He's a little bit limited as far as the coverage versatility perspective. But in a heavy cover three team that utilizes that length and that explosiveness, I think he has tremendous value as a developmental player on the next level, but maybe not a early starter in his career. But I think that Hairston, for me, Joe, like I've been putting Maxwell Hairston in mock drafts for a while now in the first round. I think that he is a borderline first round prospect, maybe early second, but somewhere in that conversation, top 40 potentially. He's pretty long, despite only being sub 6 foot, and he's very athletic, explosive, long speed, really good change of direction. And another key, weighed in 183 pounds after being sub 180 at the Senior Bowl, being over 180 and also running in the 4.2s. That's a very healthy conversation.
Folks, let us know in the comments below. Who did you think impressed the most at day 2 of the NFL Combine? Hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.